What's the cringiest thing you've seen a bride and groom do for their wedding? At a classmate's wedding, they were young, maybe like 22, 23, there is apparently a caking tradition in some parts of the country, where when they cut the wedding cake, the couple feed each other a bit and smear each other's faces with cake as a joke. The bride had absolutely made 1000% clear to the groom she did not want to be caked. He did it anyways, and not just a small smear, but full on smushed the slice in her face. She was stunned initially, then got up, face full of cake, yelled, "You asshole, I told you not to do that," and then ran to a back area in the reception. The groom tried to follow, but the bridesmaid's mother of the bride stopped him. So he sat at the head table awkwardly while half the wedding party rushed off with the bride. She stayed back there for like an hour. They eventually did let him back there to check on her. We could hear her crying and them arguing. The rest of the reception came to a screeching halt until one of the bride's aunts emerged and directed the servers to clear the tables and put on some music. They got divorced 2 years later. The groom gave a speech thanking everyone for coming that devolved in the space of about 2 minutes into a straight up roast of his new brother-in-law. They were friends, and the brother-in-law seemed to take it in good humor. But there's only so much implication of "I'm for sure going to be ducking your sister tonight" that you can take before it becomes really cringy. It didn't help that I barely knew anyone there because I was a +1, and B, I was on the table with the elderly relatives from that side of the family, who were less than amused. They sang their vows to each other. Neither had a singing voice. Vows were generally battered crazy, like submissive in the bedroom, and not asking about where she was going. The auto-tune microphones were a terrible idea. Their vow songs shared a chorus and it was awful, and they expected the guests to sing along with the chorus. The vows singing lasted 20 minutes. Pure cringe. At the reception line, after the church wedding ceremony, the bride had a large bottle of her favorite perfume and sprayed each guest with it, female and male, whether they wanted it or not, as they entered the banquet hall. Some guests complained that the smell of perfume was so strong that they lost their appetite and couldn't partake of the banquet. I wasn't a guest, I was working the wedding. The bride got drunk and sat on some other dude's lap for 2 hours and flirted with him while the groom sat by himself at the head table with a defeated look on his face. The groom sang his vows. I honestly had to stare at the floor and slow breath to not laugh and get through it. Invite all their Facebook friends and expect 700 people and like less than 100 show up. I've worked over 200 weddings at the same venue. Many couples wanted fireworks and we had a company that could always do a show. The couple always, without fail, would pick Firework by Katy Perry to play during the show. They bought an apple orchard after leaving the city to live a simpler life, and really doubled down on the apple theme. Apples everywhere, on the tables, in baskets all around the venue, on the podium where they got married, pictures of apples hanging everywhere, small fake trees with apples tossed under them. The dude marrying them had an apple tie on, apples somehow incorporated into every dish for the reception. The cake was shaped like an apple. It was really ducking bizarre. They sold the orchard a couple years later because they had no idea what they were doing. Bride takes 3 hours to appear. After the ceremony, she and her spouse go up in an air balloon. The marriage did not last a year. Oh, I have two. 1. The bride decided to sing as she walked down the aisle. She was not a particularly talented singer, and she was singing over a Carrie Underwood song so we could all hear the original vocal track. She finished walking about halfway through the song and then stood there and sang the rest of the song at the groom, and all we could do was sit there and watch. 2. Different wedding. They began the wedding with the groom playing an out-of-tune guitar and singing to the bride. They were sitting on chairs in front of everyone. Legit 400 people. And the bride was clearly uncomfortable, which made everyone else uncomfortable. That wedding also included a foot washing ceremony. And when the bride put her shoes back on, she tripped on her dress and fell flat on her face. They hadn't done the vows yet and the ceremony stopped for 20 minutes to deal with the nosebleed she gave herself. My cousin and his wife are super religious and maybe the two most awkward people I've ever met. They did one of those fake out first dances where it starts with a slow song then transitions to a dance number with an upbeat song. Not only is that naturally cringeworthy, The upbeat song was 5 minutes long and they just kept repeating the same moves over and over for what felt like eternity. There was no alcohol allowed at the wedding, so there was nothing to dull the pain. The ceremony also was the name reveal. They changed their last name because they didn't want to be stuck to their heritage and didn't want anything to hold them back. Turns out they changed their name thinking they could erase their mountains of debt or at least hide from it. Turns out you can't live under two legal identities. Not the groom and bride's fault, but the pastor marrying them talked about his marriage and his kids for 20 minutes. He was obviously going for something of showing what marriage will be like, but he full up was talking about how his daughter, Kelsey, learned to walk this way, and his other daughter's first words were this and that he and his wife make love throughout the house because that's what you do when in love, etc. Bride and groom had to stand there holding hands for 20 minutes right in front of him as the other 150 of us had to listen about his ex life and his kids. Flew away in a helicopter at the end, but there were only appetizers for food. My wife and I don't dance, so we hadn't danced together before our wedding dance. Loved it, but it was cringeworthy. My own wedding, so me, my brother and our wedding band surprised us with a beautiful rendition of a very romantic song by a guy called Juan Luis Guerra. Just so happened to be me and the missus' favorite song ever. Lots of happy crying and one of the best memories from that day. Unfortunately, my Mill doesn't like to be one-upped, so she impromptu got a distant second cousin from her side of the family who we did not know to immediately sing My Heart Will Go On from Titanic. He was not a good singer and used a ratty YouTube karaoke track and it led to very awkward slow dancing, followed by fuming from her after we cut it short. Terrible feedback from trying to play the track on the mic from phone speaker. Just completely deflated the beautiful moment from my brother's singing. At least I'm happy to say we're still going strong and have been married for 10 years now. It should go without saying that little poop nugget of singing was not included in our wedding video. Edit. While this really blew up, my biggest comment and Reddit yet. To those who asked, this is the song. I know a guy who recently made his lackeys, sorry friends, compete to be his best man. Most pretentious thing I have ever seen. Watching them grovel was so upsetting to me. Not the bride and groom but the bride's father. I was the best man. They married young after she fell pregnant. It wasn't planned, but they clearly loved each other and it was the right thing for them to do in their eyes. Both Christian. Anyway, come the wedding day I'm sat next to the bride's father at the reception and I can see he's looking at his prepared speech repeatedly. I can see phrases like often not ideal. Also Oliver preferred not to welcome you into the family in these circumstances etc. Just before the groom gets up to give a speech, the bride's father excuses himself to nip to the loo leaving his awesome speech behind. I'm not ashamed to say I swiped it and then pleaded ignorance when he returned. In the end he stood up and muttered a few words about love and then sat down. I never told the groom and I'm happy to say they're still happily married 20 years later. Update. Blimey, that blew up. I never expected this to be noticed but thank you for all the very kind comments and awards OA. At the beginning of the reception, we all had to stand up and sing the national anthem. To be clear, this was in another country I'd never been to a wedding in before, so I thought okay maybe this is just a tradition I've never heard of before here. Then I told this to other people, and they were all like no, that's just really weird. Also, at that wedding the father of the groom ended his speech with what I'm sure he thought was an amazing joke on how it's easier to build a bridge to Hawaii than to understand what a woman is thinking. It would have been awkward enough had the man not also been standing between his ex and current wife as he was delivering it. Dated a girl in my 20s and went to her friend's wedding in upstate New York. In the middle of the service the minister's cell phone rang. He answered. It was God. God wanted to talk to the groom. Conversation lasted a couple minutes. Then the ceremony continued. I was at a wedding when I was 8 and instead of the bride and groom getting up to make their speech thanking everyone, they had done like an awards show. So the DJ opened up an envelope, announced their names. They were handed an award statue, a Barbie and Ken doll, and proceeded to thank everyone in the form of an award speech. In the right hands. It would have been funny, but the bride and groom are incredibly shy by nature so it was just awkward. I'm in my 30s now and I still remember this. Friend's wedding. The bride wanted to sing him a song, so she did a kind of karaoke thing. There's bad singing, and then there's whatever the hell this was. It was so awkward. Also, dude asked a professional photographer friend of ours to photograph the wedding about a year before. Got a super non-committal answer, never followed up, and was shocked that the photographer didn't show up after he specifically declined the invitation because he was going to be in another country. Had the entire set of groomsmen rent ridiculously expensive tuxedos. Which, fine, cool, happy to be here. He's having his tux custom tailored. Asks for something ridiculous and gaudy, but when quoted the price says he can't swing that and insists they do it for about one stroke for the price. They do their best to meet specifications within the given price range, but it's bad. Really bad. So, the groomsmen look amazing, and he looks like a clown that didn't put on his makeup. Has another friend make a custom batch of mead for the toast, but rents a hall that doesn't allow outside alcohol, so it can't be used for the toast during the reception. It was probably the cringiest thing I've ever seen. Not just the cringiest wedding or even cringiest thing at a wedding. Probably my cousin's wedding. The food was really bad, and I mean really bad. Things that were supposed to be warm hot were ice cold and completely undercooked. There was music but nobody was allowed to dance because we don't want people to dance on our wedding. There was also no alcohol, not a single drop. But the worst thing was the seating arrangement. They didn't plan on families friends sitting together. I don't know what they were thinking. I was sitting on a table with complete strangers. They even separated our grandparents from each other. After an hour my grandmother stood up, walked over to my grandfather and both declared that they are leaving now to the restaurant down the road having something good to eat and a beer. I joined them as well as my parents. It didn't took long that people noticed that our seats were empty. Really easy to figure out since nobody was allowed to dance or walk around in general. We got a call from one of my uncles where we're at. After we explained why we left he said you are right. This is bullet and we ended up with 20 guests from the wedding and that small restaurant having a fun evening. I still don't know why they even bothered celebrating their wedding. They also never invited us again. That's actually a good thing because now I don't need to find an excuse why I can't join their future parties. I went to a wedding once where they did the potluck. I guess it okay depending on the type of wedding, but the reception was at a fairly nice venue. The wedding couple was like an hour and a half late, and their best man didn't have a speech ready so it went on for a very painful 15-25 minutes. Also stating in there that they're going to have great sex now that they're married. This was a devout Christian wedding with many of the friends, including me, were from church. By the time me at like table 15 got to eat, I was lucky if I got something that was kept warm in a crock pot, but everything else was room temperature. We were able to go home between the ceremony and the reception, but I bet most food had been sitting in people's cars since that morning. Oh. Also the church that she moved to did the whole no kissing before marriage thing and started making out with her new husband on the altar to the point where the pastor had to say okay, that's enough. The whole thing was weird. Bride entered to Braveheart soundtrack blasting on boombox. Civil service that lasted a few minutes starting at around 1 PM. She leaves to same blasting Braveheart soundtrack. The mother announces that the reception starts at 5:30 PM. There is no food and no bar, but trays of dessert bars will be served. We are also told the venue is locked until then so there is no place to wait. My girlfriend and I leave with a crowd of people to across the street to an Irish pub for drinks. A bit of a party breaks out there. We all get told to knock it off and come wait back at the venue in the hall. So we sit in the hall on the carpet for a few hours without drinks or dinner. Bride and groom arrive and enter the venue to an honor guard of floor hockey players wearing hockey jerseys and holding sticks above their heads like swords at a royal wedding. More Braveheart music of course. Place emptied out pretty quick as people either left to go back to the pub or to the fast food place a bit further away. Our dinner was lemon squares and a can of Coke from a vending machine in the lobby. Funny stuff. Edit. I should mention that I got guilt tripped into staying after the event to help clean up as I lived nearby and didn't have to work that day. It was the perfect ending. The minister, or pastor, used to date the bride and gushed about how wonderful she was. Told the groom if he ever died not to worry, he'd take care of her. I was shell shocked. I so wished I could think of a reason to ask the couple for a copy of the video of their wedding but couldn't quite find a legit one. It's a tie between my sister breaking her knee, seriously, at her own wedding dancing to the Cotton Eye Joe, and my stepsister having her reception at an honest to god truck stop while 6 months pregnant. In her defense, the food was good, but wow was it weird walking through a gas station in formal wear. Dress up as Belle and the Prince from Beauty and the Beast. The wedding was also held at a Renaissance fair during Pirate Weekend. The marriage lasted 6 months. But at least I got to dress up as a pirate and go home with a bridesmaid dressed as a fairy. It happened at my wedding and I still look back and shake my head. 1. The pastor who we pushed to marry us found out that we had sex before marriage. He made sure to point that out during the ceremony. 2. When saying the vows I wrote, I got so damn emotional it all sounded like gibberish, and when I turned to get the ring from my best man he was bawling his eyes out and couldn't find it. I can't imagine how PPL and the audience felt. Okay, so as soon as the bride and groom got out of church, everyone went to congratulate them and give gifts, which usually are flowers, alcohol plus envelopes. The bride had a pen and notebook and she signed each envelope or wrote in notebook if someone didn't give her envelope. Later, as we went to the restaurant where the party was about to start, we waited for 2 hours for the pair. Turns out they made a stop during their ride to count money. As they finally got to the party, they started complaining that they didn't make enough to pay for the party expenses and earn more. They only spend time only with the rich part of family. The poor tables didn't get the good cakes food. There was literally different food on some tables. I sat near our poor part of family. No meat or cakes made it to the table. Me and like 7 other people didn't get forks. Only spoons. Why would you give fork to someone when there's only soup for them to eat right now? Mind you, I gave them enough to pay for like 5 plates people and I helped them during preparations. I even baked a few cakes that I didn't get to eat in the end. Half of people got out after like 20 minutes. Bride called them all terrible for ruining her dream wedding. Worst wedding ever. And that is just a part of the whole wedding mess. I wish I had a car back then so I could go back home as well, as the wedding was terrible for many other reasons as well. Groom was cheap. Bride was a Karen. I live in Britain and as a child there was a show on CBBC, children's BBC, just like this. The show was called Marrying Mum and Dad. Oh lord, I hate that show. It's about these kids who get to arrange their parents' wedding. They choose the theme, the entertainment, and the cake. Naturally, the kids were always making absolutely horrible occasions. Because what did you expect? They would choose a ridiculous theme for the wedding. Australia, medieval, space, clowns, and have everyone arrive dresses appropriately. Then they make the couple do some activity or another. It ranges from bungee jumping to VR, for entertainment. Then they have the wedding and eat the cake. The worst part is that the parents have no clue what's happening. They don't know anything until the day, and the children will go out of their way to make them uncomfortable, making them eat bugs for entertainment. Everyone just has to go along with it, and you can tell all the guests are really awkward. And then at the end the couple have to say just how good their Australia themed wedding where they ate bugs was. In November 2018, I attended the wedding of my in-laws' friends. They were an older couple, in their 60s, that had been dating for decades and finally decided to tie the knot. The husband did a stint in the Navy, and so given the timing of their wedding, he invited a lot of his veteran buddies from across the different branches. During the reception speech, the guy had the DJ begin playing the military hymns for the various branches, and he asked all the various veterans from said branches to stand up and be recognized. I get where he came from, wanting to pay respect given calendar proximity to Veterans Day, but absolutely nobody, veterans included, knew he was planning to do that. They all kind of stared amongst themselves and awkwardly stood up. The civilian guests just fidgeted for the 5 minutes or so this went on. His heart was in the right place, but damn if it wasn't cringy as duck. Later that night, the bride got really drunk with her girlfriends and spent a while dancing barefoot on the floor. At some point, she took a wrong turn and wound up rolling her ankle pretty badly. She ended up in one of those mobility boots for about a month. Not wedding but engagement ceremony. They reenacted a scene from an old romantic film about 2 lovers in 1800s in front of like 300 people. I DJ'd a wedding for a couple that were constantly throwing up red flags as to why I shouldn't DJ their wedding, i.e. asking for a discount in exchange for a positive review. I don't want your ducking fake review. One of these red flags was when they wanted me to live mix their special dance number. I'm fine with mixing live. It is what I do professionally, but these two were not professional dancers. Honestly, at this point I can't even remember what their complaint was. They did their dance. It wasn't entirely smooth, but their family and friends loved it because, get this, their family and friends love the bride and groom. Immediately after the reception, the groom gave me a tip and they both said I did an amazing job. Cut to the next morning. Likely while the bride and groom were still drunk, the groom emails me with some constructive criticism. A few emails later he is demanding that I apologize and that he isn't going to pay me the balance of what I was owed. He then ghosts me. A few days later the wedding coordinator contacts me to say that I have to give them a discount because they are so mad at how their first dance went. These two people, who are not professional dancers, who awkwardly pulled off a terrible first dance, with nobody who was present knowing how the dance was supposed to look, blamed me for feeling awkward. I just told the coordinator that the bride and groom can keep their money. My mom and Mill insisted on doing a stage, a bit of theater often to mock the bride and groom by showing embarrassing pictures from their childhood. Cringe-worthy all by itself. But we explicitly asked them not to and they went against our wishes. So when they performed their stage everyone was annoyed and embarrassed. When we finally made it through that ordeal we wanted THD party to resume. But my Mill did another stage and we were about ready to kill her. I was forced to sit there and had to watch the bride and groom take pictures in poses that were from Bollywood movies for 2 hours straight. When I was at a wedding of my parents' friends, the groom tried to throw a decently sized piece of cake at the bride who moved out of the way. The cake ended up hitting my 76-year-old grandma. We all had a good laugh, but we were all cringing at the same time at the missed cake attempt. I was raised a Jehovah's Witness. It's a cult. Dating is only allowed to find a marriage partner and was very monitored to ensure no premarital touching occurred. Worst wedding was a small ceremony. It was literally her family, his family and my family in her grandma's living room. What made it the worst was the XXX kiss at the end. The groom wanted the bride inside his mouth hardcore. There was tongue in and out everywhere, saliva and hot breathing, complete with first date excited groping. Nobody knew where to look for 5 minutes. Giving horrible vows and speeches. A part of my family has the habit to use any family gathering as a moment to remember loved ones who died. That's not a comfortable habit for me, but to each his own. However, it becomes very weird when wedding speeches and even vows start to include great uncles who died more than a year ago. And the only people who actually knew him are my grandparents. Yes, the vows. And not even in an interesting way, but just if only Uncle Barney could have still been alive while we are getting married. To be honest, our entire family is horrible at giving speeches. There's 2 brothers, one of whom is my dad, and 2 sisters. My parents can only make joke speeches. The uncle and his family make dry lists of things they do. For example, his wedding speech for his son was a 10-minute monologue about renovating the couple's kitchen. One aunt can only boast about achievements their family members have gained. If there's no achievements, there's no speeches. The 4th is the one with the death speeches. Went to a wedding in the United States. This was both the bride and groom's 4th marriages to each other. They got married 4 times and divorced 3. They picked a dirty motorcycle bar. Not my wedding. There's okay, but were openly giving young children alcohol and laughing at them being drunk. I asked my friend if I could leave when the bride pulled a knife out of her breasts and tried to stab the groom for having sex with a woman while they were divorced. I'm not sure if this is common at New Jersey. Other weddings I attended while in the USA were not like that. I'm in the wedding industry. I've been to over 3,000 weddings. The singing your vows thing is never ever going to work out like you think it will. Never sing your vows. Never attempt to sing any part of your wedding. It will not go as you visualized it. A wedding day is not a good time for surprises. Don't surprise your bride with an unexpected part of the ceremony. Don't surprise your mom by the wedding itself. True story. The bride told her mom she was going to an engagement dinner. The only exception to this rule is if you give the bride a surprise addition to her ring, a saw grandma's diamond, a ring made from her parents' rings, etc. Jokes about sex later are never funny. They make people uncomfortable, and it makes you look like an adolescent. There will always be crickets after you make the joke. If you are going to be late, communicate that to everyone somehow. Have your so, or your parents, or someone tell everyone you will be late. The staff needs to know, especially if you forget the rings. Don't stress it, it's a funny story. If you forget your vows, wing it as best you can, just don't sing. Ask the officiant for help for last minute vows. Finally, don't get drunk and be an ass. You don't want to be that guy. Plus, if you are drunk, you won't be able to have sex later. Crickets.